Hello, everybody. Welcome to. I've kind of we skipped a couple, so I forgot to count. But the July 2014 meeting of the East Bay Drupal Users Group. Well, it's funny because with the camera it feels like I'm speaking to like something outside. So I realize it's not. There's a job announcement.
Yes, my company. I work for a company called SCS, which is an environmental certification company in Emeryville. And we are looking for a short-term Drupal contractor. If anybody is at loose ends and wants something to do, please come talk to me.
What kind of work is it?
We have a brochure site running on Drupal that we want to expand and add some features to, and possibly event registration and some other cool things. So there's a lot going on. There's plenty to do.
All right. Anybody else have anybody? James? Yeah.
My name is James. I'm a freelancer here in Oakland. One of my previous clients, Box.com. Anyone not know who they are? Like Dropbox for Enterprise. I just stopped by their office yesterday to catch up with them, and they're apparently trying to build a web team right now, and we're looking for advice on what to do. So if anyone is interested in a full-time position at Box, I know that they are starting the hunt right now, and I can help give a little introduction to them. So if you're interested, I can leave in 10 minutes, unfortunately. Just raise your hand and I can give you a card real fast, but if you're not interested, don't. Anybody?
All right.
All right, done.
All right. Any other job postings or? Catherine, are you looking for any people to work for one of your things? Or?
Not at the moment. Do you have any people to offer?
Yeah. Is anybody seeking employment? Or is anybody in the job market? We're a pretty stable bunch right now. Okay. All right. Well,
I'm always looking for custom backend development, like all purely custom architecture work. So that's what I love to do. Always looking for good opportunities. That's it.
all right.
Oh, I actually have to know something. If anyone's interested in teaching UC Berkeley Extension for the art and web design department, I was instructors. If you're interested, please see me.
All right. Well, so let's get the show on the road. I am very excited to introduce someone who needs no introduction. Jennifer, Larry. I know, it's always like written out though. I wasn't sure about that. As I think everybody knows, Jen is one of the co-forkers of the founding forkers of the Backdrop CMS project, which honestly, I mean, I don't know if I've like followed enough, but I think it's just the coolest thing going. I mean, it's taking. It's this opportunity to reboot Drupal without doing too much. Yeah, and you know, so I won't cut it off too much, but just I think at this point you've been doing it for so long, you might be getting like I mean I don't know.
No, I'm so excited about it.
All right, because I'm totally you know when you proposed the idea, I was like, well, is that really gonna work? And now it totally does, right? It's downloadable and it's doing new things, and it's got momentum, and it seems like the problems that would have killed it have got passed. Like now it's just finish it and get going. So with that flailing introduction, I'll let Jen take over. And
All right, so how many of you were here last time I did the talk on Backdraft? 4 or 5. I know your names, 4 of you.
A lot of this is going to seem fairly similar, just because there's enough of you that weren't here last time. I'm going to go over it. I'll try not to be too drony about bits that you've all heard before or already thinking. But I'm going to talk to you about Backdraft CMS, which is a fork of Drupal. It's a fork of a really early version of Drupal 8, which is a lot like Drupal 7. And we'll talk a little bit about why we started there and where we're going, where we are now. Pretty close, pretty exciting. Got a whole bunch of new momentum in the last month, I would say. A whole bunch of people finally started acting interested and made us feel a lot better that maybe we were on the right track. And it's also helping us get a bunch of so Nate is the other founding work that he couldn't be here tonight. He's doing work that pays our bills, which has a deadline, so he's not here. I've got a video he'll be in later, so you can feel like he's here. All right. So why are we doing this? This is a trend map of people on the internet talking about Drupal over time. You can see it peaked back in like 2009. Does anybody know which version of Drupal was most popular, or was the version of Drupal back in 2009? It was Drupal 6. And I think that the reason that Drupal 6 was something that people really liked was because it was super flexible for comparing to anything else in the market at the time, and it was really easy to get things done. You could do really affordable things that you couldn't have done without Drupal. And I felt like it was a great tool for empowering people to do things they couldn't have done without Drupal. And over time, you know, there's been a whole bunch of stuff that's happened since 2009. There's a whole bunch of new CMS in the market, like new tools that didn't exist back then exist now. So decline, not necessarily a decline in Drupal, as much as a explosion in everything else that's going on the internet that's hard to however, if you take a look at the current Drupal sites that are running today, this is from Drupal 6 or Drupal. If you look at Drupal 6 sites, that's this blue line here, more than half of the Drupal 6 sites that were ever built haven't moved off Drupal 7. They're just sitting here. And so there's kind of a thought process being like, well, if everybody loved Drupal 6, but never moved off of it, not everybody, but a lot of people love Drupal 6 but never moved off of it, like, why? And then if you look bigger picture at this curve here, I would expect that if Drupal were continuing to grow in popularity, this would be more of a curve where you get existing developers building new sites all the time, but you also get new developers building new sites all the time, and you see it in. But instead it seems to be kind of flat, which makes me think that we're a set number of developers continuing to build new sites, but we're not getting much project, or not as many people would rather like us to have a healthier project. I don't really know what that means for something else, but that's just something. So we're going to try and take things back to where they were in the Drupal 6 era, not in terms of like what the web was. We didn't, we've come a long way. We like what's going on, but in terms of what the product delivered to people. I want Backdraft to be a comprehensive system that helps solve people's problems, enabling people to think new things about the tool, to do the things for an affordable price, and hopefully also keep them up to date with the latest version of software. So upgrades, affordable and less painful as well. So talk to you about what we're going to be working on with Backdraft. We've got this list of initiatives, what you want to call them, areas of focus. One of the biggest pain points with working with Drupal sites is deploying new sites and deploying new features on existing sites. Right? We've got this module called features in Drupal 7. Which helps you kind of bundle configurations and deploy them, but it's imperfect. It's not really what it was originally designed for. That's what we use it for. It's the best and only tool that we have for this job, but it's inadequate. In Backdraft land, we're going to be using configuration management, which will take all of your configuration out of database and store it in flat files, essentially in JSON format, which will enable you to deploy changes more easily from your development site to production site, or from production back down, and vice versa. Views is also the #1 module of core. We're going to be adding that. We're going to have a revamped block and layout system, which will help the team. We're going to have an enriched editor, tutorial experience, deal with some of the new changes of web that are coming on, a little bit what their solution does, make it run faster. This is a big thing. Clean up the theme system for front-enders, start to like it a little bit, and improve multilingual ability. This list, for anyone who's been following what's going on in Drupal 8, is almost exactly the same as what they're looking at, with one major exception for blocks and layout system. So a lot of you are probably thinking, like, wait a minute, Drupal 8 is already doing these things. Why are you here, right? They're solving all these problems. Nobody left the wheel. But before I tell you about why we don't like what Drupal 8 is doing, I want to give you the perspective of like where the are coming from. Some of you have heard this before, some of you really quickly. But Nate and I are Drupal trainers, meaning that we talk to people who are new to Drupal about how to use it, how to code for it, and how to maintain sites in a way that's manageable for the long term. We deal with a lot of problems that people run into when they first encounter Drupal, and we want to try and solve those. We're core contributors. We've been working on Drupal long enough that we've found little things we can fix, and we started fixing them. Sometimes we ended up fixing really big things. Nate wrote a lot of the subsystems, or several of the subsystems that are in Drupal, and I was an initiative lead early in the Drupal 8 cycle. So we know what it's like, how the decision-making process works or doesn't work in Drupal land. And I've also been really actively involved in the community long before I ever wrote any code for Drupal. I ran the registration desk at a conference, and that was my initial contribution. I am more committed to the people behind Drupal than I am to code, which is why when I feel like the code goes some direction I don't believe in, and I think there are people behind me, I'm much more motivated to for the people. So what's wrong with Drupal 8? With this, these are what I call the 5D of Drupal 8, the things that I don't like. Difference from Drupal 7, how decisions are made, distrust from the existing community, the developer audience is intended for, and the direction of the project. We'll talk about each of those in a little bit. So to start, difference from Drupal 7, when you install Drupal 8 and use it, it looks almost exactly the same. So I'm not talking about difference in terms of the way it looks or difference even in the features that are provided. What I'm talking about is a difference in code. This screenshot in the back is a comments module in Drupal 7. It was a discrete set of files. You could open it up, you could look in it. This is something that encourages people to contribute. Like even if you don't really understand what you're doing, you can see that and you go, oh, I can read these files and I can. This is an if statement and this is a function and I can figure out how it works and I can get involved and I can fix that. In Drupal 8, this is some comment module. It doesn't even fit in this entire view. There's more. It's just a lot of files and it's not any different functionality-wise. It's exactly the same thing. It's just been reorganized into modern development practices, which is good if you know modern development practices. But if you don't know at all and you just go to the website and something wrong with it, you want to fix it, and you open the code and you see this, it's more of a psychological barrier than an actual barrier, but it is something that will make it harder for people who aren't already developers. And if you think about the amount of change that has to happen from here, get from that to this, it's a lot of work, and that's part of the reason why Drupal is taking so long. Now, so does anybody know what this number represents? This is the number of contributed modules that exist for Drupal 7. Doesn't include sandbox projects, doesn't include Drupal 6 projects, it never got ported to 7. This is Drupal 7 alone. And this is stuff that the community created, right? These are not core developers. Most of them aren't. And if you say, okay, well, this is what our community is made of, what does it really mean to ask all of these people to make that kind of drastic change in their code, where they used to have 10 files and they're going to have 100 files? How much time is that going to take to contribute to you? We've got these projects like Rules module, that's asking for like $70,000 for one module. I've got sites that run 50 modules. Like, what does it look like then for the cost of those sites to use them? So just a burden there on our community. So, decision making. How are decisions made in Drupal? Turns out we don't vote. Drupal works on this thing called a duocracy. It's this concept that exists outside of Drupal, but it's really hard to find a definition for duocracy that isn't really good. Actually, the idea here is that people who do things get things done, and they get recognized for those things, and then they end up with a position of authority because there's someone who does something. There's a couple of really good examples of this, at least ones that I'm proud of, right, where I volunteered to run a meeting. It was the first, we've got to solve this theme system problem. And then I accidentally ended up in charge of an entire initiative because I was the person who did the thing, was run the meeting. And then, oh, well, now I'm in charge of all these people, and I've got to get them together, and then we have to have follow-up meetings. Now we need to have a list of what's going on. We need to have onboarding. We accidentally ended up in charge. And then I end up with all this credit. I'm like, well, just because I did something, like it wasn't like someone said, Drupal needs this, and then it happened. It was just but there are also examples where that's a bad thing. And this is from the Drupal 7 development cycle as opposed to Drupal 8. I don't know. Yeah, it's maybe a hard word, but there are a couple of things that got into Drupal 7.4 that were good ideas, but did not benefit the majority of the Drupal community. Alternate field storage, this is so that you can take your fields and store them in something not MySQL, like there's a whole bunch of people that store their field data in Mongo, and during the Drupal 7 process, they rewrote the way field storage works. 6, CPK was really normalized and beautiful. People said it's all just kind of dumped into every field gets a table. And then people were like, well, that's okay, because you can write your own field storage system that has normalized data. You can use that if you want, but it turns out nobody wanted it, right? Once they got handed something, that's what we've got these examples of other people with big trips that are leveraging the system that they did before. The system, they think, is slower and less performant, and it's hurting the majority of the but not necessarily crypto. And the same thing for alternate engines for your database, right? The main driver of this was Microsoft SQL instead of using MySQL in the back end. But it turns out that only like 9% of the community ended up using it, and things other than that is not even. So we have an entire database abstraction layer and a Drupal-specific database transaction system that database can't be between your database and next generation. That only exists in Drupal, and it creates a huge amount of overhead for rendering pages, and it costs more time to build a query using our query and execute it. And we have to that benefit of how much brain. So it's just kind of thinking about people who do things get things done, and is that the best way decisions should be made for the direction of the enterprise? So there's also a little distress from the existing community that really big. Usually, something I do myself, but you never know. So there's a couple of different areas of distress, and number one is the cost. This is the thing that I'm facing as an independent contractor with a lot of clients that are nonprofit, they're small and medium-sized businesses. Every time they ask me how much something's going to cost, they're shocked by the sticker price. And I think sometimes they get into that because they hear the software is free, and they're like, oh, free, I'm going to save so much money. But then you're like, oh, no, okay, let's talk about this. You've got to pay to have something developed. Like, you can only put together so much. At some point, you're going to need to have, built, or you're going to need some kind of integration with the system that you already use, and that's going to cost money. Developers are expensive. That GoDaddy posting account is not going to cut it anymore. You've got to move it somewhere. That's probably going to have some costs associated with it. Oh, by the way, you're going to have to keep up on all these security updates that come out all the time, and there's a cost associated with that as well. You've got to make sure, internally your structure can handle, everybody stop editing, you've got to do whatever at midnight on Friday, whatever that is, and you've got to pay the developers again to do maintenance. And then, oh, by the way, you know how we charge you $2,000 to build your website, and now it's $54,000 to upgrade it. Woo! Right? It's just kind of this process in Drupal where it costs more for upgrades than it does for the initial build, and that's just not really sustainable for these small businesses that are perfectly happy with their website. They don't even really need an upgrade, and now you're telling them, they do a skip version, but then it's going to be $20,000 upgrade if you do it later. You've got to sync it with oh, we need to rebrand. Let's just wait till you rebrand. It's hard to sell an upgrade on this. So there's a little distress there. And then the other one is just how hard it is to learn, right? I've got clients who are like, well, I don't want to pay you to do all this stuff. Can you just teach me what you do? And I'm like, sure, let's set up a meeting. And then at the end of the first day, they're like, whoa, I'm never going to learn this. I'm like, yes, you are. Take a little step now, take a little step next week. It's scary. There's a bunch of things that don't make any sense, and it needs to be just a little bit. So we want to work on fixing it too. So, Drupal's developer audience. This is something that's particularly relevant to me as a trainer. I've taught groups full of Java developers and taught groups full of people who just have a website and want to figure it out. And learning is different for those two groups of people. This is a quote Chris had in an article back in early 2013, where he specifically divided the developer audience into 3 groups. He called them the self-taught Drupal developer, which is where they learn how to program for building a Drupal site or playing the Drupal site and learn that way. Or professionally trained developers who have been to college and had some kind of training in Drupal with some kind of background. And Drupal is really intended for the second group, the professional people, where we're trying to adopt paradigms that they've seen everywhere and trying to get professional developers excited about Drupal. It's something professional developers haven't really been excited about Drupal historically. And the people in the Drupal community who are professional developers yell about how sloppy the code is, and how, we're not using modern practices and wasting so much time. And, as a developer, I feel that sometimes, where you're working with code, and it's kind of a mess. But at the same time, when you adopt these practices, there's a cost associated particularly for these people who are trying to figure out how to get their minds around stuff they need. So this is a graph that Nate and I made up. There's no actual data here, but this is what we would expect So in Drupal 6, I definitely was mostly people who had a website and started getting into Drupal. Part of that was just a long time ago, a lot more people just kind of dabbling, and a lot less people who were professional developers who didn't do web. But then, a small segment of those people who are using Drupal and good part of things and trying to figure out how they know what they know about development and stick it on this Drupal. And then in Drupal 7, the professional development market started growing, right? Drupal's moving closer to the enterprise. Got these needs of trying to do this stuff much harder, and that there's still a bunch of weekend warriors playing with it. But there's been a huge increase over the last few years. It's actually working. So what I expect is going to happen in Drupal 8 is that these modern development practices are always going to work. If they're going to flash and they're going to be fine, the systems I understand, with huge increase in development traffic, which is good. But if we lose too many of these weekend warrior types from this inability to put modules and unwillingness from 7 to 8, the number of people using Drupal is going to flatten. So what we want to do, I said all that, is kind of fill the down-market gap underneath and give the people who might have been left behind some place to go. And thinking, if we can keep it really close to Drupal 7, there isn't going to be very much of a learning curve. You just take your Drupal 7 module and throw it in the backtrack and see if it works. And hopefully it will, and if not, you're going to, refactor a little bit of code, but it won't be rewriting the whole thing. You can use people with Drupal 7 sites or give them an upgrade path from 7 to backtrack. There's no upgrade path from 7 to 8. You've got to rebuild the site and migrate it. How can we help these people who already have these sites and help them stay here with what we cover the majority of the employment and maybe a little bit of professional market, and whether one client needs to cover that. But we want to make sure that this graph continues to increase in terms of the number of people who are getting what they need out of Drupal-like projects. So hopefully we'll be able to follow that up a little bit. And then the last thing I'm worried about is the direction of the Drupal 8 project altogether. It's really great if you have enterprise clients who need Drupal to do things that they've never been able to do before. Drupal 8 is going to solve all of those problems. I have maybe one of those clients who can benefit. Most of my clients are completely happy with what Drupal 7 can do, or Drupal 7 plus a ton of control. Like, there are very few limitations that I say, no, you can't have that feature. There's some things it doesn't do very well, right? Where you go, oh, maybe we can use a service, right? But there are a bunch of things that it does really well, and I feel like there's a really huge market that is served well by Drupal 7 as it is today. Drupal 8 is going to have a larger code base. It's going to have more dependencies on external libraries. It's going to have simply based features. It's going to have object-oriented code and design patterns. The patterns are really more important than the code structure. And dependency injection, crazy concept. And the whole thing is just kind of moving into this area where, if you have a team of 30 developers, they can tackle your Drupal site and, you'll be fine. But if you're a small company or a nonprofit that has one person who works on your site, and you're now asking them to do the same kind of problems they were doing before, these things can kind of start to add up, feel almost unattainable. We're excited. So we also did a bunch of looking at, this is like using the site builtwith.com that analyzes sites on the web and figure out what they're made of. We did a lot of looking at who is using Drupal for what, just to see if we were kind of in line with the enterprise. This is a graph of Drupal market share by site traffic. So if you look at the top million sites over here, Drupal has been decreasing in the number of sites that it actually runs. If you compare that to, let's see. Okay, so yeah, this is the blue line is the top 10,000%. This is top 100,000, and this is the so this is the most of the websites. If you look at if most of the websites running Drupal are larger sites, and if you look at the curve goes up, curve goes down. Drupal is used 4% on the top 10,000 websites, but only 2% on the top 1,000 websites. And so if you look at WordPress, it's basically the inverse, right? Where WordPress is trying to touch more of the small of the internet that's large. But when you cut down to the top segment of the internet, it's running just kind of what you'd expect, right? Like Drupal is good at little websites, so a lot more little websites than big websites. I want to see Backdrop somewhere in the middle, right, where I want Backdrop to do better for the little guys than Drupal 8. Otherwise, then, this is going to go a lot more in the top, which is what we're at after. But I don't want to lose the all the little. So what are we going to do about these problems? I want to talk a little bit about how Backdrop is going to do these things differently than Drupal, because we've done a lot of thinking about this. Backdrop, instead of being a bureaucracy where things that get done, we want to be a meritocracy. And instead of meritocracy traditionally a system where people who have merit get power, we want to apply this towards the ideas and the decisions that are made. So rather than being about people, we want to be about the features or the code that they're in. So we want to evaluate code based on its merits, or decisions about the direction of the project based on the merit of these decisions. And meritocracy is a great idea as long as you have some standard for what merit is. But there are two different factors that go into that. You need to decide who gets to make that decision, number one. And then number two, like, what do you use to decide what has merit? And we've thought about both of these things. The first one, who. We're using a model from Apache, which is another really successful open source project. And they have this thing called a project management committee. And this works not just for Apache, but all the Apache projects, like Apache Solar and everything else that open office. They've got a whole bunch of Apache projects that all use the same model. Project management committee is a group of people who get to make decisions about the direction of the project. And usually that only comes into play when there's some conflict between committers or between what should go on. That conflict can get resolved by the project management committee. We're going to use it a little bit differently for Backdrop, where we're going to have a whole bunch of work going on, where everybody's writing code and merging and stuff. And all of those merges will be handled by a really large group of committers. So we're going to empower more people to do actual committing. In Drupal, there's a very small number of people, of course, who have core commit access. And those people are also left with the decisions of like what should be committed, which ends up creating a little bit of a bottleneck during the review process where instead of just reviewing the code and seeing the code good, they have to review it and say, oh, is this even what we want to do? And then usually what happens is they go back to the community and say, community, is this what you want to do with the project? And then it takes a really long time for this to get in. So what we want to be able to do is have the committers just be responsible for reviewing code and merging it in. When a decision needs to be made about, should we be doing this in the project, well, it's not going to be up to the committers to make that decision. It's not going to be bounced back to the community. That's going to be asked to the project management committee. And that'll be a smaller subset of people who will have the ability to talk about these issues on a basis or as needed and say, yes, this is the direction we want the project to go, or no, it's not. Make the decision and pass it back up to the committers who will be reviewing it. The second thing, what criteria are evaluated? So if you have a committee of people who make decisions, how do they make those decisions? So we need to have something public that you can find that says, like, what is this project's philosophy? And this came from Nate and I, who both been working in Drupal for more than 7 years. And when we started arguing with people about the direction of Drupal 8, we're like, this isn't what we're supposed to be doing. And they were like, yes, it is. And we're like, well, let's go find out like what Drupal 8 is supposed to be doing. Let's go find some principles. And it took us a really long time to find out like what exactly Drupal is supposed to be doing. And when we found with them, it turned out we were wrong. And Drupal 8 is doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be adopting like hottest new technology rather than things that the majority of people use. It's like, oh, well, okay, I just didn't know that. Sorry. Maybe we should do. So what is Backdrop's philosophy? We want to keep change to a minimum. Again, that came out of our experience with Drupal. I think we want to keep making integration. We want to architect for the majority. That means keeping code easy to read for everyone. Designing for the majority, which means only features should get in and benefit the majority of people are writing software. Making sure it's extensible. So this is just making sure we can have control. Like we need to have APIs, we can have UIs, just so that the minority can still achieve what they need. Product. Keeping system requirements low. This is like a minimum PHP version, a number of resources you need on your server. So you can still run Drupal on shared hosting. It's not an option. It's really important. The little people that have that option for Backdrop. And we want to issue planned and measured releases so we can keep everyone up to date with their software. If those measured releases are small enough and there's always something new, people have incentive to continue moving on to the next version. We make it easy enough for you to move from one to the next. People will actually be able to do it. And then, of course, because our history is based in open source, we want product to remain open source. So, keeping change to the minimum. Right now, if you compare a Drupal 8 module to a 7 module, you'll see there's about 20% code overlap between the two. We did this a while ago, but it's probably less now. We don't have accurate statistics of what it is today. But that's a lot of change. It's 80% change. And what we want to do for Backdrop instead is say, let's keep 90% of the code the same and have 10% change. And that's something that I think is a lot easier for the community to stomach in terms of upgrading things over, upgrading your sites. And that changes specifically from Drupal 7 to Backdrop, but we want that change to be continuous for Backdrop 1, Backdrop 2, Backdrop 3, same small amounts of change each time, so people can stay on top of what the web is doing and not have to worry about what the software is.
Any sense for what the delta was between 6 and 7, or 5 and 6, or any other?
We could probably figure it out pretty easily. I would guess that, and it's been said in the Drupal community, that change from 4.7 to 7 is about equivalent from 7 to 8. So I would guess that 4.7 to 5 was probably like 20% difference, and then 5 to 6 was probably like 30%, and then 6 to 7. So yeah, we want it to be much less than that. 5 to 6. That's kind of the limit of what we try to do. So architecting for the majority, making sure everyone can read these files. That means using really basic language patterns, like object-oriented code only where it actually makes sense to use object-oriented code. If you want people to understand object-oriented code, you have to open a file and say, this is a function, read it out the file. Direct implementation over abstraction. Drupal loves abstraction. In our history, we like to take something that is kind of good at one thing and say, this is similar to 8 different things. It's abstracted, and we can all use the same thing. And it's, recycling, right? We like recycling. But if you do that too many times, it gets really hard to read code. So you don't understand what the things you're doing are because it's arbitrary. So we're going to try and work out some of that abstraction where a little bit changed. We're allowed to do. And then just make sure that things are direct and straightforward. And if that means that, you can't run Drupal on Microsoft SQL or you can't run Backdrop on Microsoft SQL, that's fine. Just say, this is our scope. We only use Microsoft. And that comes from a long history. I've been giving presentations for a while about how better code might not necessarily be better for the entire community, right? Like object-oriented code might be better, but what does that mean in terms of getting people on board and getting new contributors and maintaining their own site? Keeping scope small is really important. Designing for the majority, this is also, again, if we're going to put in something crazy, we want to make sure that it applies to 80% of the websites that are currently on Backdrop. So if someone comes and says, hey, I really want to add X, we're going to have to say, well, of 80% of the sites that I built, use that? Oh, wait, maybe I'm not even using it, so that's still out there. 80% of the sites they built get X here. Until we can kind of get a consensus on whether that is something we should use for or not, we'll say, we've already gone through and got a cycle to pulled out a bunch of features we don't match that tool. So in the web in general, this is something we still want to WordPress. There's this thing called the 1% rule, which is that usually 1% of people are the content creators, which is people that write code. And then we've got 10% of the community are contributors. These are people who have seen issue queues like my site is broken, if you have a blogger on your comment form, they're not the original. And then there's this 90%, like the rest of the community, they are workers. They read. They don't type. They don't tell you what's going on. They don't tell you how to feel. They use your software if you're writing software, but they don't go to the issue queue and tell you what's broken. And in Drupal, we're really good at listening to these 10%, right? We say we know what you want, but when people don't often spend a lot of time the other 80%, the other 90%, what do those people actually want? What are they using for? And it's hard to guess, right? How do you know if they don't talk to you? But we want to do it back to this kind of set a little bit more time about who people are. Trying to make this part of our community more open to business owners. We want to have people who aren't coders in our project management. Say, like, we run a Drupal website, like, what are the kinds of subs you say to the company? What are the sites you sell? Who are your clients? And those clients don't know what's here, maybe for them. There's some kind of way to better determine what the rest of them. So we need to provide accessibility too. This is for the people that we're going to cut out by saying, like, out of scope for core, right? Maybe it's not out of scope for the entire project. We could even API. We can write something that can do that thing. So making sure that all of these websites can continue to be built on the same platform. Like very different websites can still be built on Backdrop. They just need to use it with that. So last time I was here, and for most of last fall, we've been saying like, hey, when's Backdrop coming out? It's going to be coming soon. It's going to be coming soon. And guess what? It's going to be out this summer. Well, it's this summer. And we looked at the amount of work we're trying to do, and we didn't quite get that estimate right. So now what we're going to say is fall. And in order to make the next deadline, we've gone ahead and cut some of the things that we thought were really important. So we're like, okay, you know what? Maybe like a new language translation interface isn't going to happen, but let's take what's most important in terms of translation and get it before so we've pushed back our deadline. I think this is realistic. I'm hoping it'll be pretty fall, but we'll see how much polish we put on. So this is the good stuff. New stuff. Where are we now? We went in and we removed a whole bunch of stuff before. A lot of this is stuff that's like, do any usage use a aggregator module on the No, right? But it's been in there for forever. That was actually the last one we pulled up. Oh no, I used it once. Some of this other stuff is like, you know, better done in script anyway. Like there's a whole module that didn't have Ajax in it for years. Ajax was one with that, Ajax was that, and you could have had Ajax on quickly. Other stuff like dashboard, like there's a bunch of great dashboard modules, stuff before, you really got to love. Just stuff that I think should iterate faster, and it can if it's out from behind the bottom. Trimming down a bunch of stuff in core also means that we can change the rest of things faster. So the first thing we did was there, huge, out. And then it's like, oh look, core is so much smaller, and you run it, and it installs really fast, and it performs better, just because it's less code, right? But then it's like, okay, now let's go and add it.
They got PHP, so people won't be writing PHP in Node.
Well, I mean, they could install them to the console.
I mean, it's good. By being core encouraged, that means it's a terrible thing.
Yes, we're trying to make it work. All right, so we added config management. This is the thing that will help you export JSON files and move them from one to another. This is a lot like the config management mentioned that happened in your lake, but including YAML with JSON. The reason is it's 75 times faster to parse than YAML. Your lake was using YAML in other places, but for us, it didn't make any sense. We're not using anything else, so maybe parallel. Like we're just using JSON, but we're going to use the same general interface. They've already done all this great thought process of how everything should work, so we're just going to do the same thing. You can make changes, export them, and now for the things that are already perfect, for like templates or but the system is in, subsystem is in. So that's good. Views and core, everybody uses views modules. The views config modules are already reported as being in 80% of all Google websites, so that's the perfect use case for 80%. We did have a couple people in the issue keep going, I don't like views, I don't want it in core. We're like, here's 20%, dude, sorry. Just go in and you can turn it off, it's fine. There's a checkbox for that. But I think it's something that sets us apart from sites like WordPress, and I think that, you know, having features that you can say this thing is different because we have apps is going to be really important. So views and core. Again, subsystem is in, we've got a couple of views listings converted. We need to do things like make it work more fully with the views action or useful operation system. So like when you're on an implementation page, you say select all the nodes, delete. We need to build a delete button functionality. That wasn't there before. But the listing you can build now. So we're most of the way there. All the basic terms, we just need those layouts module. So this is something that's going to completely change the way people build websites, which I'm super excited about. Does anyone here know what my favorite thing is? Panels, right, okay. So there's a problem with panels. But these are invisible, right? We know that. It's a really powerful tool, but hard to use. So we took the architecture of panels, that exists in 7, and stick it in Backdrop, and we wrote an entirely new space for our page. 2 pages. First one is your settings page where you choose the layout you want, and first one is the page you want it on, and whatever context it is. Depending on what you put in here, this will automatically so you know that. And then if you need any conditions like, you know, those types of works like layouts. And then we have the layout page, which looks a little bit like the wireframe, and it will let you go. This looks a lot like panels. It works a lot like panels. It's fundamentally a little bit different with how your pages are all built on your site, because in Drupal, pages were all using one layout divided by your theme, single layout. With this, what we're going to do is we're going to take all of your layout stuff that will be completely separate from your theme. Your theme HTML is not just a skin, so you can change your skin really easily without breaking your website. You can reposition blocks and change the layout. If your layout goes your team and you want to provide layouts, you can do it, but it's got to be a separate thing. It's not, you can't put it inside your team. Otherwise, it's break. So we're going to shift with a handful of layouts. We're going to take problems and panels, as well as like the marketing layout, like some stuff that people are really familiar with, some maybe garland, like stuff. But beyond that, people can do whatever they want with it. If you will make a base or one other systems, whatever. We expect people to kind of build up and do it. Yes. So all of backup is responsive out of the box. So just like your blade, like you can switch it down, make it better, like that, and then you can switch it. And all of the layouts will be responsive out of the box. You might not like how they're responsive because a lot of different schools have got on the best practices for making things responsive. But they will all work. So as long as you don't have any of your own CSS that breaks that, you should use it. All right, so there's a couple of other stuff that we put in. Really near and dear to my heart is usability stuff. That was really cycle. And we did a bunch of testing early on to see what people use and how we interact with things. Drupal 7 redid their toolbar from 6 to 7. And admin menu is still one of the top 10 installed on Drupal. And so it's like, well, we redid the toolbar, but people still install admin menu. Like, rather than backtrack taking the template into the toolbar like Blade did, why don't we just put admin menu? Right? People like admin menu. But it needed some improvements, right? It wasn't touch friendly, and it wasn't so we made it friendly, we made it responsive. We put in a search box so if you type in layouts, it'll come to the page and layouts go. So hopefully people will have a much better experience finding the information they need. We've also renamed some stuff, just screenshotted a little bit of the modules in, so it's functionality, and then the drop down is modules in. So people don't click on modules links anymore to go to the drop down, they always saw them all the time. So we took the most important names of things like modules level, so if you get down to modules, but people don't know, new people don't know the word modules, they're like, how do I change my site? So if you can give them a better keyword and then train them like the thing you want is modules, we think it'll help kind of get people more into it. So we've done some things on that registration stuff. I know there's a much larger issue of like everything is wrong, right? Things are always in the wrong places, and we're going to work on that too. Maybe not a backdrop one. Backdrop one is like, how do we get people to the place they're trying to find and do like but yeah, so we've got to. So in terms of our roadmap, config management is in. We need some conversions done with the subsystems in. News is in core. We need some conversions with the subsystems in. Block and layout system, we have a fork branch where all of the work is going on, not completed yet because we need to make sure that the percent can override the node page. Right now, people letting page will work, but the overriding is yet, so we've got to iron that out a little bit. Rich text editing, that's really important to me. It's not in yet. We have a plan. We don't have any code. But that's on hold until we can get these things. So this is what we got finished. This is next in line, but we'll see if we can get there before we release. It might not get in until backdrop 1.4. It won't be backdrop 2, but it might not be backdrop 1. We're going to try and improve the outro experience with the two-column layouts, just like your blade has, but that needs layouts before we can get that in. We've already got improved mobile support, and all of our HTML cards are in. That's part of the good stuff that's done. Performance is already a little better, just because we cut out a bunch of code, but we have some refactoring to do here too. We've got a couple of issues that are like, hey, when I did X instead of Y, things got better. How do we clean up that? We can do some there. And the in-system complexity is also going to be reduced a lot just by having our new block layout system, getting rid of really good. We've also got a couple of major changes that I did in the big edition that we want to do again. Back up, like putting things in the right order so people know how to other systems. And simplifying the template files. So in Play, we use place to be good. But we also do a bunch of other stuff, like cleaning out all the variables. We can still do that. And we're also trying to separate data that's safe from data that's trying to make it clearer when you're doing something that needs to be done with people. So it's a lot easier. And the multilingual thing, again, we wanted to do it, we really did, but that's not in the current here. We're going to try and get like everything in core to have language associated with it and stop there. And say as long as everything has language associated with it, then you can go. But that's kind of what our reworked plan is for that. So, we need help. There's a bunch of stuff happening on GitHub. If anyone's interested, you can always go and take a look. Sometimes the GitHub issue, it's less useful than the Drupal that we're issuing to and kind of like look at. I don't know where to start. But you're always welcome to ping me in IRC or email me and be like, I don't know where to start. And I'll go, what do you want to do? And you're like, I don't know, I can write some CSS. I'll be like, perfect, here's the CSS you do. So there's definitely like things for everyone at every level. There's always things you can get involved, which is good. So we have a Google Hangout every Thursday at 1 p.m. This might be moving, but for now it's at 1. We're having some awesome people in their face in California. And then after that meeting, or every Thursday, all day long, we're in IRC working together on issues. So if anyone wants to share whatever it is. Walking today, I'm going to work my background. I said a lot. Our teacher knows contact us. We have a website, backupcms.org. You can load it up. We have stickers. So if anyone wants stickers, you can come grab stickers afterwards. And then our GitHub project is staff job. And then yeah, Twitter, we tweet cool stuff if we remember, like, and then they need to core. If you follow us back up CMS and then meet night. So I want to show you before we go into questions. I have a video that Nate made of LayoutsCon demo. Anyone want to see that? Okay, it's 10 minutes long, so if you get bored, let me know and I can stop it. But it's pretty cool. So I'm not sure if you can hear it. Goodbye.
Did anybody watch this from the link I sent in the announcement? I included the link.
Okay, so he's adding a new layout. And just reiterate what he's saying. So he's trying to overwrite the display of the article. So he's pointing out here that if Google or backdrop knows the path that you type in, it'll automatically provide the first context for you. But if you have more complicated path, the second context, it's not going to know what that is. It's only going to stop the slash percent. So then you'll have to say, oh, the second one is or whatever the next context is you guys. And that's always an option for like string pass-through. So if it's not something that context that the system is aware of, you just need that value to make it into your layout. You can put that. Here he's adding a condition. This gives you some conditions.
Is that all the same context?
Yeah, we're recording everything from panels.
So that huge list becomes this.
They're not all there right now. And that will be more like the user interface, but like search box where you can type in. And now I'm going to show you your config file that is generated from the layout. Again, all the sources are right in the box. JSON file that you can move inside the site. page manager and panels, which we need both of. Page manager was responsible basically for your paths, like where the page actually lives, and panels was responsible for what appears at that path. Backup has the same concept, but not in the user interface. It only appears in the JSON files that are generated. You get one individual router item and one JSON file for your layout. And so you just want to change it, and you one of them, or better safe than sorry, but that's just a little system. But again, this will have the user interface, and it will have a search box on the left, and then the drop down on the right, button on the right. So we're going to take the groups for the categories and panels, and all of the blocks currently work saving their sites in the CMI as well as blocks usually save their variables into the variable table. Right now they save into both, but we're ready to default variable saving. So we've also changed the way that titles are handled and some style settings. We didn't update the style plugin, so they handled it. So it's like we just added a drop down. So we wanted to write your own stuff, but they did here in the drop down. We give you two by default, one of them which is just going to be your standard block wrapper. And the other one is this really complicated one that gives all of your markup, just like you use since you listen to really well and saying, this is a nav tag, and so we did that same thing can happen here. The reason we didn't only do this is because it makes your markup like printing out separate markup up there. So we have a simple template file and a complicated template file. Interface and but either way, you can have that class. So like you can sit in the class. And the condition system here is exactly the same as the condition system that's on the entire page. So you can have like a block which will get rid of it. You can do that here, just like you can do the entire page. So it'll be the same interface, same access. Everything important is where the entire grammar, like what's actually displaying your layouts, is also flexible. So when panels and the vendor, but let's use the front end as well as back end, that's all still in there. So if you wanted a front end drag and drop tool, you could have it, but we're leaving it. It says after you've created some layouts, we're going to provide you with at least one or that will be default to all your but as you start adding humans, they'll all appear and that's still work a lot like the user interface. One. So menu settings, this is really packed. Like so if you have a node percent layout, you'll have one menu item to percent, but you might have a page card and they'll all just be grouped together. Itself will have to go down settings. This is where you can choose like if you want to link on it or not. That link will make it once, so you're going to different variants. But we think we're going to do all of that complexity out of the interface backup still in the back, so if you have it code as you can, then you won't have to worry about other reasons. So here's explaining how we talked about how you can set like only user roles access to a particular you can also control access if you need that. But that's kind of an advanced feature, so we're varying it up here so that your initial experience will be. flash fill. That's but if you chose like a blue column layout, it would just fill out the entire page. There's going to be a block for header, a block for footer that you can drop in on any page so that you can have the same consistency for page on your site. When you create a new layout by cloning the default, those already be input. So the default layout is basically like what you want your site to look like. When the default layout is a new page, then we can have like whatever you want in it. Hopefully it'll be easy to create new layout stuff after you build everything. I get to proceed. This is the layout module file, right? So we're like, so not so much usually simple layouts, very clean markup to start with. Access structure, very straightforward. It's all panels. Plugins were written in a way that was object-oriented, but not actually object-oriented. It was using object-oriented layout module, we just put them into a class. So the class is still governed by an info hook if you want them. The only is the class is provided in this class. The block system is the same thing. We're in order to create compatibility between backdrop and the book. We have info files. Info hook just points at whatever the system is. If you point at functions, we get functional code. So that way we can kind of make people who aren't used to writing graphic or code tools that you still use, but we can kind of make things for a little bit more technical. So for one class, it covers all of the plugins. It's all like magic filters that usually has. They're like, no magic here. No magic. It's all different. So we've got a bunch of stuff like that. Registry can be different. Running the probably like you move a module from a directory to your site will expose into the registry gets corrupted. Yes. That's because all of the locations of all of the classes are right on the stored in your database, and your database is an active location stuff that is secretly explodes. We are getting rid of that registry backdrop. I think moving things around should be perfectly allowed. And then when you reload it, you'll find them again. And it's because we got info of the point of the thing, and so if they can find the module, they'll find the info, and then the class is stored. That would make it a little less frustrating. All right, so wait, it's a new installer. Hold on. So this is one of the things that was one of my pet peeves with installing backdrop until this week was that it would say Drupal, and it would like installing Drupal, and I'm like, ugh! And so we finally got this patching that replaced all of the word Drupal everywhere in code with the word backdrop. But we also have the backwards compatibility layer, so there's a Drupal.inc file that basically says every time you call Drupal add CSS, actually call backdrop add CSS. So if you have moved a Drupal module into backdrop, it should still work. And that's going to be good for all backdrop 1. We'll do it for backdrop 2. If you like the computer, Drupal 9 and backdrop 2. So you wait in backdrop 2. So it's there for the first version just to kind of help move sites over quickly. But the installer now, logo, exciting, and we've got a little bit of our training. We've got a whole new style guide going on. I'll let it be response. It'll be shortly too. But step 1 is the style. So very excited. All right, so questions. Ta-da! Backdrop almost done.
Great goal.
Yeah.
So I do. I maintain a couple contrib modules for Drupal. Say if I wanted to make them compatible with backdrop. I took a look at the page right now. It said register a project with on GitHub with backdrop. How would one do that?
So there's a couple of different ideas of mounting around. Depending on what your modules do, I have a couple of really straightforward modules which provide a block. All you need to do to port them to backdrop first that is added profile that says backdrop equals that. So you basically specify the core version, and then backdrop will recognize it as a module. Most modules are a lot more complicated than just providing the block, so that kind of ease of porting is not guaranteed. And so depending on how similar it is, at some point you might say like this code cannot belong on the network. It's not the same code for Drupal backdrop anymore. And at that point you'll want to create a backdrop project on GitHub. We have a group called Backdrop Contrib, which anyone who wants to be a supported backdrop project can apply to transfer into the project into that group, and then they themselves become a maintainer. So anyone can create a contributed project on GitHub that is not like an official project. And we don't have this yet, but we're going to have a GitHub service so that when you edit the settings of your project, you just check a box to say it's a backdrop project. And that looks a lot like jQuery, where you can check a box to say it's a jQuery project. And backdropcms.org will scrape that site for all the projects that are tagged as backdrop projects and then file them as data based on what you're doing. So if you just have a future project and you want to import it, as soon as we have that checkbox there, it'll be as easy as checking a box to make it a project. The supported projects, that's for stuff that, this is for the upgrade paint, right, where people create modules and then people depend on modules and then rather than having this process of like having to officially request access to a particular individual's module, which is going to be really hard in a GitHub ecosystem, what instead we would like to do is take those modules and move them into a group. And everyone who is given access to that group, you take responsibility for all of those modules in that group. So like path auto, right? Everyone's going to need path auto. Tell who's not going to get into core, who's not in the So Nate and I will port the path auto module and put it in this backdrop group. And as people come along and say, oh, I'm interested in making auto, we add them to the group and say, here you go. But that way, if that person leaves, we can just assign anyone else from that group to that module. And so we can then guarantee, as a group, this module will have an upgrade path for backup 1, backup 2. And so even if people come and go, the projects can kind of live longer than just the lifespan or the interest of that particular project. So supported is going to be a little bit more gated, right? We're going to do your module and kind of like do it on Drupal, it'll be a little different. But then once you can get into that group, it's like, you know, if you have a bug, you're Dave Reed, if you have a bug on your module and you fix it, and then you have a bug on someone else's module, you can fix that. But it'll go through the same process of like valid pull request. Yeah, just kind of make it easier for people to collaborate on stuff, because GitHub is really great in coding. But yeah, for now, pick a box. And then when we start having like the supported modules, those will also be prime candidates for leveraging. So probably what we'll do is have stuff like that date all start there, and then in backdrop 1 we'll say, okay, backdrop 1.2 is going to include these 3 modules, and then that way if they're already in that supported group, it's really easy to upgrade path from module supported group before, also gathered by several members of the supported group, and make the process easy for people to stay up to date. Yes.
So first off, I think it's really awesome, and you know, as someone, Drupal obviously is a site builder. It seems really empowering and great. And you know, from my point of view, it's like, oh, how do we get this, you know, adopted by developers? And oh, if you know Drupal 8's maybe complicated, people move to you know, Backdrop. But in terms of you know, people actually saying, okay, Backdrop's legit. Like we have, you know, my group, okay, people come to us for Drupal.
Yeah.
You know, and if we were to say something like, oh, you should look at this Backdrop thing. You know, I'm sure you've thought about adoption by nonprofits, universities.
I've had a bunch of different conversations with a bunch of Drupal shops owners, right? Where they're like, you know, it's hard to sell Drupal 7 right now, but I think it's going to be harder to sell Backdrop, right? Because Drupal 7 is hard to sell because it has the wrong numbers on it. Even though, like, if I had to build a site for someone today, I would still do it in Drupal 7, but most of the time.
Yeah.
You have to have that conversation where it's like, this is what's best for you. It's the same kind of thing, I think, only with Backdrop. It would be about picking the kind of project, right? Like, at least for me, I'm self-inclined, so it's going to be interplayed. I'm going to have to interplay, and at some point I'm going to have to be deciding, like, when do you do a project on one or the other. And I think it's about, well, number one, what's the budget for your website? That'll be a big threshold, and then what you actually need to do. Like, if it does any of those things and not fall outside the scope of backup, you definitely can't have the backup site unless you have the scope and say, well, and then there's another one where it's like, what does your team look like? What is your workflow? Like, do you have in-house developers? Do you have a long-term, support of maintenance, or are you on, hosting, or what is your plan for maintaining this thing and paint the different pictures for like, okay, there's going to be updates. Maybe they'll be comparable to the backup, but what are you getting out of both of them? I mean, right now it's like equally, I don't know either answer, right? Mr. Blade is going to be changing the way they're doing updates too, to look a little bit more like what we're talking about for Backdraft. I don't know if theirs are going to be every 4 months. I know the core updates right now come out like roughly once a month, but they have like a security update and an update. I don't know if that's changing. I don't know. Like, I think it would just be about talking to them about all of these things and trying to feel that they're, if someone comes to you and says, I want Drupal, maybe they should get Drupal. That's what they want. For me, most of my clients are coming to me saying, I want Drupal. So they come to me saying, I need a website. Yeah. And when I got started in Drupal, people came to me saying, I need a website, these are my requirements, and we want to. And that's where Backdraft is really starting, right? Where people come to say, I want a website, and like, Backdraft is cool, they can do it for your budget, and give you all the features you need and deliver it on time. And we're going to have to build our own reputation. I think, like, in-house for development companies, they're going to have to make it when do I do one versus the other. My vision is that Backdraft should enable me to continue through my process of learning how to do all the same things on Drupal. I know it's going to be a learning curve. Like, I feel more involved than most in the life cycle, and I still feel like I can't really stay on top of everything now that I've done myself in Drupal 8 compared to how I did in Drupal 7. But Backdraft is so similar to Drupal 7 that I can build websites in Backdraft, take builds, learn websites, build Backdraft in 7 until I can, feel confident. So that's kind of where I see it, and especially a lot of the bigger shops are like, what do we do? It's like, well, this is what you can make money on right now. There's like a huge investment in learning websites, where I think like, I think investments on both at the same time, but kind of make them sell faster. Sure. We have a client that will pay for the learning curve, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be up to everyone to kind of time out and see, like, pick a small project for both when you try it first, right? Like, I've definitely been learning to be like, sure, I can do this early in Drupal 7. I'm like, sure, I can do that in Drupal 7. And halfway through, I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing, right? Because you try to do the little one. It's like, okay, you can figure it out. Same thing. With a little bit of backup, right? Let's play
No, it's just from my perspective, it's like an interesting question.
Yeah, and like I said, I have this conversation all the time with people where they're like, another thing is too, like, I think I want Backdraft, but I don't want to be the only one that wants Backdraft. So I had a really interesting conference call this week where I talked with one person and they're like, oh, we have a developer, and then, oh, there's someone in Seattle, and then all of a sudden there was like this, all these people filling all these, Drupal shop owners that are filling Backdraft, and they were like, well, you're into it and I'm into it, then I'm into it, but only because it's this very, everyone wants to do it together. Like, that's we're community. Yeah. And I think that's kind of a big, like, knowing we're not in it alone. Like, that helped us too in the last month, and all of a sudden it sounds like, oh, not just us. Everyone wants this. This is great. And so what we're going to try and do on the Backdraft website is we're going to put a little, like, a list of like company logos, like these are people who either adopted or committing to or interested in some language. Backdraft, and if you're interested, you can put your logo on there. And then that way it's like, this company is interested in it, I trust that company, therefore I'm interested. And I think it will help, knowing who's on it. We've got a list of people, but sometimes that's not easy, like, not very helpful. But I think, like, if we can start collecting interest from people, then it'll be like, when it's out, these people will use it, and if it's not good, they'll, maybe, or at least tell us it's good. And I think that if we can start to make people feel like they're in the community, then people will be more willing to join. So that's a kind of a chicken and egg. Yeah. But we do have some ideas about, like, getting rid of the website, making it really easy for people to show their interests, even if it's just me and me, I think is really useful for us, because then it's like, oh, perfect, and we have a nonprofit sector, let's go talk to them, like, we've got a guy who's here and can ask you questions about what this client really wants. You know, there's stuff like that that's going to be really valuable to us, too. In terms of, so, yeah, I'll do it again. Yeah, it's definitely tricky, especially because, like, we built this for the drinking community, but not the whole people, just like our part. And so it's this weird thing where everybody is like, I don't know if I want either side, maybe I want both sides. And I think that